everybody. So yeah, my name is Axe Steiner. We're going to go ahead and begin with DMS 10 presentation. Going to cover several things, including some things that you guys are currently using in one of your divisions for the DMS for document management, document scanning, workflow capabilities, abilities to monitor folders for documents that could be scanned in or saved. Monitoring. There's also email monitoring for documents, where documents are coming via email. The email address that they're being received can be monitored, and documents can be stored into a DMS system. The system is all based around creating databases for different types of documents, and we call them folders. So Claude, is mostly what we have are users or IT or kind of a mixture?
It looks like it's mostly IT, but there are some users this is going to go to.
Okay, so a little bit for the IT folks here. Let's go into the management console. Let's see, that's workflow. Where's my DMS scan station? Where's my, oh, there it is, right in front of me. Okay, so probably I'll just start with the DMS management console first, just to go over the capabilities of where you can setting up your system in terms of adding users that are going to have access to their DMS folders. So there's a user screen to go ahead and add users. There's a way to import users from Active Directory, so that those usernames and passwords can be added into the DMS system, into the database for the DMS. Now, do you guys site that I'm connected to now? So the ESC, let's say it's a division of the ESC company. Well, that site has its own set of users, its own set of groups in which those users belong. And the groups you're going to be using the groups to define access to certain folders, certain documents within the DMS product. So based on the fact that I'm signed into to a site, I have access to the users. As an administrator, I have access to the user list, the groups, the folder configuration for that site for those documents. So this is just for the admin side of it. But just to let you know that if you were to want to keep those separate in terms of the users that access the documents, the groups that you want to define for those users, and those folders can be in a different site. Now, if a person crosses from one, division to another, they could go to that, site with the user interface and log in and see the whatever folders they might have access to within another site. So users can be also members of other sites to access the documents. But if you wanted to keep them separate, that's one of the ways that you could do it. So the groups are listed here. Groups are based on, what department they might belong to that accesses certain documents or certain folders. If you have one site for all the divisions, a group could be the division name and also say accounts payable, for example. So a division with the accounts payable group, they can access only their accounts payable folder, no other division's accounts payable folder, for example. Okay. So the folders are defined here, where you can define several, you can define as many folders as you want. So a folder, this is what would be called a category folders, and it's accounting. Within that, you can define different subfolders below. So the accounting folder can be authorized for people to view based on their group. So they could view the accounting category folder, and then from there you can limit them to whichever subfolders within the accounting group folder that they have access to. So a person may have access to all the accounting folders within the accounting folder category, or they may have access to accounting and then any one or more of the folders that are below accounting that contain documents. So let's look at accounts payable, for example. So you're scanning in invoices. Invoices come in via email. Invoices come in via saved to a folder or scanned to a folder, and those documents are going to be stored into a DMS folder. Mine's called accounts payable. The document fields for accounts payable are listed here. These are just examples of what you can use to index those documents into the database so that you have the ability to search by invoice date, invoice number, vendor name, PO number. These are just some examples. You can set up as many fields as you wish for indexing those documents.
So on those fields, are they being manually populated, or are they doing an OCR recognition to populate them?
Well, it depends. You can do things. Claude wants me to touch on screen scrape capability, the ability to take information from your application screen. So if you're taking an invoice, if you're taking an invoice into your system and entering it for payment, then we can take the data from that screen and use that to populate the indexing information for that document. So that's one of the ways that you can do indexing of documents for, say, accounts payable, for example. The software does have OCR capability, but it's really limited to full text OCR. So you can take everything on the document and OCR it and put it into a memo field, which would be defined in this list here. And so that's a full text OCR. That gives the ability of OCRing everything on the document, so all of that text is placed into a field and becomes searchable to retrieve an invoice based on something you're looking for on the invoice that was OCR'd. Now you can also set up zone OCR, and I can show you that in a minute, and zone OCR just lets you select an area on the document that's going to be OCR'd. But you would want to apply that to a template, and that template would be for that particular invoice from that particular vendor. So say you scanned in on a monthly basis 50 invoices from vendor XYZ. Well, if you have an OCR template set up for that, you could have it OCR those fields on that document, and you might scan them, a few at a time during the day, where they get scanned in and they get processed as a batch, and the OCR template is defined, and you select that OCR template to OCR that document. Now you will want anything that you OCR in terms of zone OCR, where you're picking out fields on the document to OCR, you'll want to verify those fields to make sure that the data that was OCR'd was correct. The most accurate way to index the documents is through the screen scrape capability that I mentioned first, and that means that you're able to capture data from the accounts payable data entry screen for an invoice, and that data is used to index the document, and that becomes really the most accurate way to index the documents, because OCR is not 100% accurate. Does that answer your question so far?
Yeah. So I know it's not 100% accurate, but so if an invoice comes in and it's account payable, then somebody manually needs to bring up that invoice first, is what you're saying, and then screen scrape it, or?
Well, what would they do first with that invoice?
Yeah.
What would they do first? Would they enter it into the accounts payable system first?
Likely, yeah. So you're saying after they enter that in, then they're scanning it?
Yeah. At some point they would need to scan it. So the process is say if it's a green screen application such as an iSeries or AS400 application, they enter the data, they press a function key, that captures all the indexing from that data entry screen. It captures all the indexing information that we want from that green screen application, and then adds a record into the database folder for accounts payable for that document containing all those indexes. And so therefore what that does is that's going to generate a barcode, either a barcode cover page or a barcode label. So that barcode, if say it's a label, they can place that label anywhere on the first page of the invoice, horizontal or vertical, and then at some point that invoice needs to be scanned. If it's a cover page, it's printed on a printer, that barcode, then they can just put the cover page in front of the invoice pages for that invoice. and then at some point it needs to be scanned. The barcode contains the record number that's associated with the document indexes. So anytime they enter an invoice into the system, press a function key, or if they're, I can show you on a graphical screen too how that's potentially can be screen scraped also. But that indexing information is captured, barcode is generated, placed on the invoice or as a cover sheet. When the document is scanned at some point, then the barcode will attach the document to the record that contains the indexes, because that barcode contains a unique record number for that document. And that's how the document ends up being attached to the record.
Okay.
So that's the capability. Also, there's a way to create any kind of subfolders below any subfolder, or any subfolder. You can create additional, like this is an archive folder. An archive folder just gives you the ability to transfer documents older than a certain age to other storage, say cloud storage or other disk storage. So these are documents that are not accessed nearly as often because they've reached a certain age, whether it's 5 years, 7 years, whatever the case might be. So maybe you want to free up disk space and store those elsewhere, such as cloud or something like that. But this allows documents to be moved out of the main indexing folder to an archive folder to free up disk space, so that documents that are accessed the most stay in the folder. Those that are not accessed rarely at all are stored in a different disk path. There's also document retention for the folder, so that you can purge documents older than their age that you define in terms of how long you want to store those documents. There's exceptions, so if you want to set an exception for certain vendors that you want those documents to reside longer or shorter period of time, then you can set up a retention exception and only store those documents based on any indexing information such as vendor name, things like that, to where maybe you want to store those documents either longer than the retention or less time than the retention. So that's basically a lot of the administration. The security is here, and it's what you can do is you'll see all your groups listed here that you can select any type of group, and then you can define security, whether they can add documents, annotate, view document annotation. So there's a way to annotate the documents such as sticky notes, text, stamping, things, redacting, highlighting, lots of different annotation capabilities. And you can say allow, deny, or inherit. Inherit means that anything that was defined in the main category folder, such as accounting, then for whichever group that we select, we can apply the security to that folder, and then it automatically defaults to inherit on any subfolders below. So all the security features are listed here for the folder permissions based on group. And then field permissions, edit, view, or add fields. Those are also in the security options for the groups. Search screens give you the ability, I don't know if you guys are using those now, but search screens give you the ability to define fields across one or more folders. Well, this is actually for accounts payable here. So this search screen I set up for this folder, which has certain indexes that are listed for the user to search on, and I'm going to show you those in the user interface. So search screens are custom searches that you can define for users that contain certain fields that they use often for searching. And you can set up things like, well, I want to be able to search quickly on vendor name and an invoice date range. So you're searching for basically the vendor name and invoices for a range of dates. Well, you can define that particular search with the fields that are necessary for that search here and provide those to the users so they can say, I want to search that has the vendor name and the invoice date, and I want those two fields on this particular search screen, and a user can use those to search on the vendor name, and then also a date range greater than and a date range less than. So just some other ways that you can create searching capabilities within the application to provide for users when they use certain fields often to do searches. Search sequences. Search sequence has the ability to search across, let's see, do I not have a search sequence accessible here? I don't, do I? Search sequences are a new feature that lets you build searches across multiple folders. And you can do that on search screens also. You can build searches across multiple folders to search for documents that might reside in multiple folders. And the indexes would be similar in those folders that you would create the searching on. So that's just some of the information. Also the document path here. So the documents, this is all the data stored in a SQL database. The documents are stored to a document path, which can be a network attached storage, whatever that you want to use for the storage of the documents. The documents themselves are not stored in the SQL database, just the indexing information of those documents. So any other questions? Oh, workflow. Do you guys have workflow set up already, Claude?
So our corporate team is working on that right now still. They're trying to get all the users in set up for the workflow process. They have it in an Excel file, but there's no import capability, or there's a bug with that import capability. So I think by the end of this month, they should have everything ready, and we're going to start working on a training program. Anybody that approves invoices with their workflow, they're going to need to get some kind of training. So,
right.
And Lisa Scott's been helping us with that. So,
right.
Is she on the phone?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So she's familiar with working with Pam, McCully, and Tammy.
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, my mic was muted.
So workflow capability gives you a way to build an application that's going to route invoices for an approval process. So invoices that are scanned into the DMS database, it can be automatically routed to first step, second step, third approval, fourth approval, whatever approvals that are required for the documents to where it completes its approval process, or it does not get approved. That can all be defined in a custom workflow. This is just an example of a workflow that we created for demonstration purposes in DMS to show that what you build is a way to route the documents to groups that need to approve those documents. You can do things like, I want to approve documents based on certain indexing information, such as a dollar amount of the invoice, a department that the invoice is being billed to, whatever information that's indexed and captured from the document can be used to route that document to its proper task, and then assign those groups to that task to complete that approval process. So it's really customizable. It's completely customizable to fit whatever workflow definition that you need to have your documents approved electronically by users instead of routing paper. So it has a lot of features like email notifications. It has approval via email. So if you have a user, maybe they travel, and they'd like to be able to approve their invoices via email, that can be defined. Email notifications that notify them that the document's been assigned to them. Reminders that the document needs to approve after a certain amount of time. So you could set a time limit on how long a document can be assigned to a user to be approved before they get another email reminding them, or maybe it gets routed to their supervisor or to another individual for approval based on the fact that, you know, it's been assigned to them for 3 days and they haven't been able to approve it yet, so maybe somebody else can, or they can just get an email reminder to approve that particular invoice that needs approval. So there's really a ton of things you can do with this solution. There's even scripted things that can be done where we are able to help assist you in any kind of scripting that's needed for a task that needs to be automatically processed. So in this case, I have a script here that's using the dollar amount of the invoice to route it to a manager for approval. And that would be a particular threshold of greater than or equal to $2,500, then I'm going to automatically route that document to the next step. And that would be the next task. So there's ways that our programming staff here can help in creating any kind of workflow script that might be required to automatically route the document to the correct group for approval or user. So there's ways to automatically route your documents. There's also tasks that could be a manual task. So a manual task means that the user needs to open the task, which contains the document, and then it shows them what needs to be done, whether they need to approve it, whether they need to enter data, such as maybe they need to code it for GL, whatever they might need to do with that document in addition to approving it or simply approving it. That can be part of the task that needs to be complete once the document is routed to that task and that user is assigned to that task. Any questions regarding what I've talked about so far, which is kind of a lot, but so if you are needing a workflow capability, you know, when we've got Claude's workflow, when we've got that going, you could take a look at that, and if there's anything we can, you know, replicate in your workflow capability or your needs on workflow, we can do that. Otherwise, it can be completely customized to, you know, do exactly what you need to do in your workflow document process.
Is that a separate license, or is it part of the overall?
It's part of the product. It's part of everything that you guys have.
Hey, Axe, is there OCR part of the product as well, or is that their add-on or something with OCR?
No, it's part of the scan station. So let's take a look at scan station in terms of scanning documents.
The only reason why I asked that question is because we're not doing that today, I know, across the board.
Right. So OCR capability is, let me go to scan profiles. All right, so I'm in scan profiles here, and I have two different profiles. I've got an invoice scan and a minute scan. So let's take a look at the invoice scan profile. So the invoice scan profile, at first it just has a name, plus there's any of these other imaging edit capabilities that you may need, like deskew, auto crop, dithering, things like this. A lot of scanners, you know, have these features already, like the scanning interface software has this, and maybe you're doing these things before you, or at the time of scanning, but they can also be done in a DMS if you're connecting to a scanner and scanning with that scanner. If you're scanning to a network scanner that's scanning to a folder, such as a multifunction device, and you're scanning those documents to a folder, those can be put into this system to be processed. And when I mean processing, I may mean OCR. So you mentioned OCR. So this is set up for barcode OCR. So I'm set this particular scan profile to look for a barcode that has a prefix above the index, before the index value of the letter S as in Sam. You can see the barcode name and the barcode mask. So I'm looking for a barcode on the document or on a cover page that has that character as a prefix for the index value of that barcode, so that we read that barcode and capture the indexing information as the invoice number for that barcode. So that's just an example of how you might use a barcode. This would be set up either through Folder Watch, because Folder Watch can monitor a folder and OCR barcodes. The scan station, what I'm showing you now, is an interactive batch processing. So the user is processing the scanned in batch, whether it was scanned into a folder or whether their computer is attached to a scanner and they're scanning directly to the scan station from that scanner using their computer. So this is a user interactive batch processing of documents, where you might be looking for a barcode, or you might be performing full text OCR. You see that right there. So perform full text OCR. If that box is checked, then everything on each page is OCR'd and put into, that text is put into a memo field so that it becomes searchable to retrieve that document. So there's the full text OCR capability that you would want to perform on this scanning profile that you would apply to a particular batch that's been scanned. So then you have highlight capability. So this highlight function, so if part of this scan profile, what I want to do is scan in invoices from this vendor. So if I want to scan in invoices from this vendor and I want to create a scan profile and I want to OCR these vendors' documents, then what you're going to do is you're going to start defining fields to zone. So here I draw a red box around this invoice number here, and then I save that, and I save that as the invoice number field here, and that zone is done. Okay? So that zone is completed, so that whenever I scan in these invoices for this vendor and I use this scanning profile, it's going to OCR that area of the document for the invoice number. Now here's where accuracy comes into play. You see how very little room I have here, right? When you scan in documents, they can go crooked. That number could be crooked to where any of the lines or any of these other numbers could fall into that zone, or any of the numbers that are in the zone could fall out of the zone. So you see there's not a lot of room to zone that index. So it may not be as accurate as you would like to have it. Now if that invoice number is kind of out here in a bunch of white space and you could draw a nice, large OCR zone for that field, then that would give you better accuracy to know that, there's nothing that's probably going to go into that zone based on how the document was scanned. So anything that was scanned crooked or not of great, maybe it wasn't of great quality at the time it was scanned, may not OCR accurately. So everything that you would zone here, you'd want to verify in the data entry section just to make sure that the indexing values were correct when it did the OCR. So you do have this with DMS. So this capability of OCRing a zone on a set of documents in which the zone is in the same location on those documents, say for a particular vendor that you do a lot of business with, you have a stack of their invoices and you want to scan them in, and you use this scan profile because you've created a zone for their indexes on their invoices, and you scan them in. So this is an interactive batch process of working with scanned documents for OCR, full text OCR, barcode OCR, and also data entry. So you do have the ability on any batch to perform data entry. So this is the data entry screen for indexing documents. So the data entry is on the left, you can see here. Now it does have a way to select data for a field and then OCR it. So for the invoice number, what I did is I just drew a box around the invoice number and it put the value right there in the field. Now also, let's say you enter a voucher number and maybe a second field such as like a vendor PO or vendor number. If you entered, say, 1 or 2 indexes, the software has the ability to query another database to retrieve the rest of the indexing information. And that can also happen after the document's been indexed and scanned. So maybe you want to capture check number as an index for the document, for the invoice. Well, we could query a DB2 database, SQL database, and capture the check number for those invoices. So that's a batch process where capturing indexing information can be done from a database query automatically and capture check number for the value of the invoice. That way, you know, if you paid multiple invoices on a check, you do a search on check number, you'd see all those invoices paid by that check. So we do look for ways to help you guys not have to do any data entry of the accounts payable invoices, such as screen scrape of your application screen to capture indexes, OCR, barcode OCR, querying other databases to retrieve indexes such as check number. Because if you know when you're first indexing and scanning the invoice, you don't have a check number yet, you may want to capture that later with a batch update process that we can help you develop to capture those check numbers for those invoices. So just throwing out some things here for you that that you can do. The drop down, you can add a list. So this list of vendor names is captured from another database table which contains your vendor name list, and you can put in information here. There's a list that's generated. Department, some of these things like department, you can, if you capture from a certain folder of documents that belong to a different department, documents can be indexed based on the folder that they were scanned to. So if you wanted to do something like that, you could. So a lot of different things, that you can do. You can make fields required in terms of data entry.
I got a question.
Mm-hmm.
Can OCR recognize logos?
No. No.
This is not a web-based tool here, this one, right?
No, sir. This is a user-based tool that's used to, process scanned-in documents.
Okay.
So for looking up the documents, there is a web-based tool. So this is the DMS web interface, the web client that lets you log in and access your documents. So wait for that to come up here. So this login, so say you're a division that has its own site. You have a site name, username and password. So this site that you're logging is your division. It contains your users, your folders for your division. We can log you in automatically. So if you want that capability where the user, based on the fact that they're logged into the network, they could log in automatically into DMS. So this web interface, you can see accounts payable as, or accounting as my category folder. So any of the category folders can be expanded to show the subfolders. So I can select accounts payable for my division since I'm logged in as that as a site, or maybe As a group that I belong to, I have accounts payable access to the accounts payable folder for my division. So maybe the subfolder is the division, right? So the subfolder for accounting could be accounting dash division, Barry Wehmiller or whatever. So that's another way you could separate, different divisions, is that they have their own category of folders. So maybe their category folder is their division, and then they have other category folders below their division category, and then their document folders below that as subfolders. You know what I mean by that, Claude?
Yes.
Yeah. So instead of setting a site up for every single division, you can instead have a folder category for that division and then have all their folders listed there, right? And then you could divide up, security amongst their groups, to which folders below their division they can access. So that's another way that I just now thought of that. That's a good way to do it too. Is just divide up category folders for each of the divisions, and then they have their own set of folders. So let's say I'm in this division's category folder. I see I have access to the accounts payable. I'm just going to click the Show All button here, just to show all the documents for this folder. So you see the indexing information that we looked at in the management console. So the administrator has defined for us a folder. As a user, they've defined us an accounts payable folder with date, invoice number, amount, PO number, vendor name, etc., check number. Those are the indexes that are available to search in order to retrieve the documents. So this web client can be used with any browser, including Safari, Google Chrome, Internet Explorer, Firefox, whatever that you want to use, whatever that everybody uses, whatever. So it's nice because if you have an iPad and you need access to documents, you can use the Safari off the iPad to access your documents. You can also use it to perform workflow tasks, because the workflow web client also works with any browser, and I'm going to show you that in a minute. So the indexing information is here. The search button has a search. I mentioned the search screen capability. So here's a search screen that we called invoice search, and it has PO number, vendor name, check number, invoice, department. So this is a search screen that I created as a demonstration of the fact that you have the ability to create a search screen for users containing fields that they search on the most. In fact, it also has an all field search. So this contains all these fields. So for the all field search, I can put in a PO number or a vendor name or a check number or an invoice or department. I can put that up here at the top. Or I can put in a specific PO number, and I can say equal to, starts with, contains, full text index contains. So if the document is being full text indexed, it's being indexed into that field, that data, so that data can be searchable. Greater than, less than, not equal to, like, not like. You can use wildcards for some of these. So if I do a search, I'm just going to search there. That brings up 3 documents based on that vendor. To view the document, there's a button on the far left under Options, the magnifying glass to the page there. So this is viewing the document. It has annotations that someone placed on the document, highlighting, stamp, annotation, highlight, redaction. Those are all done here. You can see the list of all these annotation icons that you're able to do, text annotations, things like that. Also has, a way to select pages. I have barcode separator pages in here that I left in here, but these can be eliminated when you do batch processing, because if you take a batch of documents and you have, want to separate each of the documents into different records, this is a separator barcode page that separates those documents, because some of them are 5 pages, some are 2 pages. If you do the screen scrape with the barcode, and each invoice on the first page has a label or a cover page, if you do the screen scrape with the barcode, that's the separator between the documents. So you can take a batch of screen scraped documents with barcodes on them, and you can scan them all in at once, and then the software will split those documents out and assign them to each of their records that have indexes attached based on the screen scrape capability. Also, you can select, you can do a control and then select certain pages that you can export to save as PDF. So I can save these documents as a PDF, and you can see the pages that I've selected from the thumbnails. You say all pages, current page, save that as a PDF. You can print. You can send a printer, or you can send a PDF document. And you can say document and annotations, or the document only. So generating this PDF, either saving it as a PDF or generating as a PDF on the print option. Once you have the PDF, you can then email it to the vendor or whomever, because you've got the PDF copy of it that you can go ahead and email or print, whatever that you needed to do. There's some quick annotation buttons up here. We put some of the most commonly used annotations up here at the top: the highlight, the sticky note, and the stamp annotation. Viewer preferences here. What you want for your default zoom, what you want for your font size for your text and sticky note annotations is set here for the user. So each user can set their own preferences on viewing the documents, and also their annotation text default size. And you can use these arrows here to flip through each of the pages. Zoom in, zoom out. And this is a TIFF image. And you can also go to the next document. So at the top left here, there's a green arrow to go to the next document, because we did a search and we retrieved 3 documents. So I have these green arrow buttons here to go to any one of the documents. This is a PDF here. So PDFs or TIFFs are typically the way that people scan in documents. And you can also perform any kind of annotation on a PDF document. There's also add a document. So to this document, to this invoice, I want to upload additional documents, and they're on my desktop computer. Or if they need to be scanned in, I would generate a barcode cover page so that they get scanned in at some point, and then they'll get attached to this record along with this document. So any additional documents that are not TIFF or PDF, let's say they're Word, document or an email that you attached, or Excel spreadsheet, any file that's different than a TIFF or a PDF would be listed here so that you can view them. Let's see here. Let's see. I think I just have TIFFs on those. Yeah, just TIFFs on those. So you can attach any type of document as long as your security permissions allow it. You can really attach any kind of document, JPEG, whatever that you wanted to attach to the record, and it would be attached as part of this whole document. Append a document, so if you have another PDF you want to append to this, or a TIFF you want to append. Replace document, delete document, add a linked record. So maybe there's another document record that you want to link to this one, so when you search on it, you retrieve both this record and the record that you want to link it to. And so when you link a record, you just put in the information that you want to link this record to, so it'll be a link to a second record. So I'm creating a new record for this document, and then it's attaching this document to that record. View document in new window. So that lets you open up, right? That lets you open up multiple documents at once, and you can go through each of those and view them. So now I've got all 3 documents as tabs up here in my browser. Okay, so also let's look at another feature that's pretty cool. Let's go back to close out the document window, and let's look at export. So the export capability is that you want to export a set of documents. So the export capability, I select export documents. So whatever I searched on, which would be vendor name ESC, I have 3 records, which are 3 documents. You can select all of those documents and export those to an email. So if you're doing, say, a vendor name search on a date range, and you wanted to take a section of those or all of them and export them to an email to send them to a vendor, you could do that. So this allows you to batch export all the documents to an email. You want to include your annotations, you can do that. And this, so whatever you searched on, you can select for your batch export and send all those documents at once to the vendor, to manager, supervisor, whatever the case might be. You can also export the records. So the data containing the indexing information can be exported as well, and it downloads it as a CSV file. So in that case, what would you have? You'd have all your indexing information, the amount of the invoice. So if you need to put that into a spreadsheet to do any kind of calculations, to generate any kind of report of those invoices that you searched on with that indexing information, if you needed to do that, you could do that. Let's see, the pencil button there allows, if your security allows it, you can update your indexing information or add indexing information. That would be a security feature. Note, you can attach a note to a record. So this is different than annotations. Annotations on the document would be sticky notes, stamps, text, highlighting. This is an actual annotation that is attached to the record. It shows the user that it was added and the user that modified it. If it was modified, the date modified, which is this case it was not, it was just added, and say this is the note. So an annotation is, I'm adding a note to this record, whatever that note might be. There's an add document here. There's a clone a record, so you can make a copy of the record. There's delete record. These are all features of security. So based on the group that you belong to as a user, you may not see any of these features except for viewing the document. Some folder, like this folder here, I have a launch workflow. You can have a workflow that's launched manually, and here I have that in this case, to where I have a folder that's set up that contains documents, and I may want to launch a workflow. That means move this document into the workflow and start the workflow process for this document. So this is a way to manually launch a workflow from a folder for a particular document that you want to be put into the workflow. And when you do that, you can specify which workflow that you want to add that document to. And maybe you only have one choice, but if you have more than one choice, then it's a particular workflow that you want to add this document to, and it gets routed using that particular workflow. Want to look at any questions about that before I go into the workflow client? The other thing too, do all of you use this kind of a screen to look up invoices, or a graphical screen, or both?
A little bit of both.
Okay. from green screen, you can go and look up an invoice, and the screen scrape capability not only does it index documents, but it also does a lookup. So if you're in your invoice, if you're looking at an accounts payable invoice that's been paid or needs to be paid, and you want to retrieve the invoice, we can have the screen scrape functionality capture indexing information off that screen when you press that function key, and it'll open the web interface and automatically retrieve the documents for you in this screen. So that's a kind of a quick lookup that you can look up. Not only can you index, but you can also look up documents from a green screen or a graphical screen. And I need to talk about the graphical screen because it's a lot different than the green screen in terms of doing a screen scrape functionality. But that's a way to look up documents. And then you didn't have to log in. You just want to do a quick lookup of those documents, press the function key on your green screen, up pops the document or the list if there's more than one. Workflow client is here. Workflow client gives you the ability to log in and access your documents that you need to approve or route to the next step or perform data entry. Whatever the case might be, this workflow gives you the ability to access those documents and those workflow approvals where you need to work with the document. So let's say if you're a particular member of a group in your supervisor or your manager group or whatever, or your department, and you approve invoices, then you would go to your group and it would probably bring up your group. It would bring up your group automatically based on the fact that you're a member of that group. And then it's going to show you any documents that you need to work. I have 2, and I'm going to check that document out. It assigns it to me, admin. I just checked it. Let me check it back. Check that document out. I can approve it, or I can deny it, and then I got to type in a reason why I'm denying it. I want to email the vendor I want to email the vendor that it's been approved, or that it's been approved. I want to that's not set up right, actually. That's not actually set up right. But it can do things like, you know, if you need to email, if the vendor needs to be emailed on why it was denied, or emailed that it was approved for payment, you could set that up in the workflow. You know, we'd want to capture the email address of the vendor either in the workflow itself or from another database, something like that, to capture to capture the email of the vendor, to email them any notifications from the workflow that you wanted to send them. But anytime I approve a document, I complete the task, it's then removed from my list of tasks that I need to approve. If I deny it, then I have a field here. This is all customized. So this is completely customized to what you want a group or a person logging into workflow, what you want them to be able to do within the workflow, or what they need to do with the document once they get it in the workflow client. So this again works with any browser that you want to use, including Safari, Google Chrome. It has annotation features also, the same annotation features as accessing documents from the other interface that I showed. It has the ability to add a document. So you can add a document to the workflow. View document. Let's see here. You've got mark things urgent, not urgent, mark things pending, not pending. So you can, you know, see a list of everything that's urgent. If someone's marked it urgent, someone marked it, say, well, this is pending. That way other users can see that it's urgent, that belong to this group if they're approving invoices, or they can see things that are pending. So any questions about the workflow client? No? Okay, so do you want to talk about screen scrape through a graphical screen? So let's say you want to index documents from a graphical screen. I have a sample data entry graphical screen on mine. This is just an Access database, accounts payable, where I've got data that I can enter for the invoice on the screen. The way that screen scrape works for graphical screens is that we use an XY coordinate for where the field is located on the screen. So for invoice number, what we're going to do is we're going to locate that position for on the user's screen, what that position is, what that XY position is. Let's see, do I not have that?
So everybody on the call, I've asked Dax to cover this. Think of this as PowerLink, because sometimes when they open up PowerLink and they get into an area, they only have it not the full view or maximized. So this is what they would need to do for if they use it in PowerLink and want to capture that link.
Yeah, so if I have the screen like this, and I've defined my XY coordinates of these two fields to be in this position of the screen, yeah, the screen scrape's going to work when I do a screen scrape. Oh, and if I say, I'm supposed to have this maximized, I'll maximize it, and then I'll run it again, and it'll work because it's been coordinated for this location on the screen. So that's basically what the capability is for the Windows screen scrape, that when you define it on your screen, then that's where it needs to be located next time you go back to that screen to do data entry. So you just want to make sure that if the screen was maximized and you defined your XY coordinates of those fields on where they're located on the screen, then you're good to go. Then what's going to happen is you're going to do a screen scrape, and then it's going to index the document, print a barcode that's going to be placed on the document, or a cover page that's printed out, and then the document gets scanned at some point, so it's attached to the record with the barcode. Now you can do the same thing on a lookup, to where you can do a lookup of the document. It would be the same case where the location is what's important. We do have an API down. We have these API buttons down here at the bottom: invoice lookup, index document, and do a check lookup of the check that was printed or stored in DMS. You can store checks in here too, by the way. You want to store a copy of the check. So there's an API to LaserVault that can be used as a URL API or a .NET API, and so these are coded into the Access database application to do that way. If you do it through an API, then you don't need to do screen scrape. It's built into the application to do an invoice lookup or index the document, or both. So with application link, I just have this, I have a floating button here, and I don't have it quite set up, but I just have this floating window for application link, which is running in my taskbar. So I've got that. I can go there. Let's see, where did it go? Hold on. I clicked it. So I got application link, monitor screens. And that will monitor the screen. Where did my button go? Lisa, where'd my button go? Oh, there it is. Lost my buttons. So monitor screen, update with a barcode. So that's the screen scrape capability for graphical screen.
And if whenever anybody wants to get to this point with setting this up through the app link, you just got to work with Lisa Scott or the Laser Vault support. Is that correct, Axe?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Doesn't take much time or effort. Just got to hook up with them.
Yeah, you got to do that. So the two things that are important on Windows graphical screen scrape is, resolution of the monitor that they're running, resolution setting, and so that can also determine the location of the field. But we have a tool that helps you easily locate the XY coordinates of the field on the user screen. So it's pretty easy to use and then those values are just plugged into application link. And you can take the configuration file of application link and give it to all the users, and then therefore the only thing you might change is if they all go to the same folder, you can give them each the configuration file for application link, and then only thing that would change would be the coordinates of the fields, the XY coordinates of the fields, based on their screen resolution and how they use the application. They'd want to use it maximized, or maximized would be the easiest way.
All right. Is there anything else you need to show us?
That's it.